Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right, hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. On this show, we interview recovering addicts who have life-changing stories of overcoming adversity and anyone who has like a story of hope. I'm currently in California right now. We're opening a new treatment center out here, so I've been here for a couple of weeks. It's been hard to find people, and I actually got hooked up with someone in recovery that introduced me to Anthony, and you told me a little bit about your story on the phone. I'm excited to hear it. I'm excited to hear LA stories, you know?
Yeah, I think that anytime it comes to Los Angeles, there's such a diverse culture here. Mm-hmm. So many different struggles. You know, for me, I'm 52 years old. And so I grew up in a society, low income, a lot of barriers.
In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles. I grew up in a small town called Wilmington. It's about 20 minutes from here.
Okay.
It's out in the Los Angeles harbor. That's where everything happened for me, as a young kid, where my personality was kind of developed and how I became the way that I became. It's a small community where everybody knows each other. It's not a really small town. When I was growing up, everybody knew each other. You knew your friends' dads probably went to school together. I'm a third generation Mexican-American, Chicano.
Okay, so 3 generations were born in California.
Actually, I've talked to my grandfather, right? It's really hard because I think when we went through a period of time with during the 60s and stuff like that, people, especially of the Latino race, the Chicanos, we weren't accepted real well if we had an accent. And so a lot of the households didn't want to speak Spanish,
Wow.
Even though it was the first language. So I used to ask my grandfather, what part of Mexico are we from? And he used to say California. He used to say this, we were here when this was Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
a lot of people don't know that. My mom used to always tell me that because I'm half Mexican. My mom used to always be like, we didn't cross the border crossed us.
Yeah. I've actually been to school and taken some classes and learned about, the history of our people, the Native Americans, really they got crossed. And anytime you dive that deep into, the educational process and learn about your people, a couple things happen. One, there's a feeling of sadness, what took place. And then there's a level of pride too, because we've, even though with all the struggles we've endured everything. But, going back to the city that I grew up in, my father, at a young age, I learned that my father was an addict, that my father was, using heavily, started going in and out of prison when I was really young. My oldest brother followed in his footsteps. My dad would come home, for a few months and always go back to prison. But it was always due to the drug addiction and crimes that he committed behind drug addiction. I knew about drug addiction since I was a kid. For me, I mentioned to you earlier that there's 7 of us kids. And so I got 3 older siblings and 3 younger siblings. And I was right in the middle, but I was usually the one that was looked at as the good kid, the smart kid, the one that was going to help my family escape, the neighborhood and poverty and stuff like that. And as a young kid, I embraced a lot of that. I felt like I was smart and I could do anything that I wanted to do. Some things happened over a period of time and, we lose sight of that. I fell into the trap, but through education, I learned about the preschool to prison pipeline, and the society that I grew up in actually spent more money on my failure than on my success. And what I mean by that is they put more money into building prisons than they do higher education. And so a lot of people that come from my type of background end up struggling.
Yeah.
And we fall into the traps that are, actually set for us. And whether they're purposely set or not, I don't think it really matters, but it's the way life was when I was growing up. So I did real well when I was younger, involved in sports, that's really important to discuss, because in the 12-step process that I'm in now, I started to learn a lot of things about myself, like self-examination and just figuring out where I went wrong and why I went wrong and why I made the mistakes that I made and how I can be a better person today. One of the things that I learned was, obsession and compulsion, right? Driven by, total self-centeredness. And I think about when I was young, was that present in my life? And I think that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that I just used it in a good way. I was obsessed with being a good ball player. I was obsessed with...
What sports were you playing?
I played baseball. I really played everything, but I excelled in baseball. In the community that I grew up in, there was a baseball park. It was called J.C. Field. The best of the best played there. We would go to the baseball park on the weekend, and you just didn't want to leave. The atmosphere and the excitement and seeing friends. And the only problem for me is that most of the other kids had their mom and dad there, and my mom would come out, but my dad was never present. And when they would ask me questions about my dad, I would either avoid it or I would try to defend, why he was in prison. He's a gangster. And I really didn't know really deeply about the disease of addiction.
Was your dad in prison for most of your young adult life?
Yeah. I have pictures up of my dad. My dad passed away a couple years ago. My dad's name was Johnny. He grew up in the same city. Everybody knew him. He knew everybody. It was really a big deal, like, to say that was my father. Our last name in the community carried weight.
Yeah.
Everybody knew my family. And I really wanted to mention that, something happened when I was 7 years old. And we're talking about 1977. My mom comes from a big family. She had 9 brothers and sisters, so 10 kids. And the baby of the family was active in the gang. He was from a really prominent gang that they called the Chain Gang. And he ended up getting killed. And in 1977, drive-by shootings didn't happen. And so for us to experience that, he was killed in a drive-by close-range shotgun blast that blew his face off.
Wow.
I remember...
This is your mom's brother?
It's my mom's baby brother.
Baby brother.
I remember, having to get up in the middle of the night and going to my grandmother's house. And it was just absolutely, just absolute chaos. My aunts, fainting, and my grandmother, just hysterical, and my mom. And my mom was pregnant at the time. She was 9 months pregnant, about to deliver my sister. It just shocked me that somebody could take another person's life. And my uncle was 15 years old. What happened after the murder was my uncle became like a legend. And if I went around the neighborhood and said that was my uncle,
you got respect.
I got so much love and respect.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, a fallen hero that paid the ultimate price. We got so much love and respect. To this day, if I mention my uncle's name, my Uncle Mundo, people, there's older men who still say I named my kid after him.
Wow.
It was just really a big thing, and what happened was my oldest brother dove deeper into the gang. My sister got into the gang. My other brother, and then I followed, and then my younger brother, my younger sister.
When did you start getting into the gang life?
I kind of stood away from it for a while through sports, through school, and breakdancing. Breakdancing for us was...
so funny.
So I kind of joined late, about 14 or 15 years old.
Okay, that's late?
In that area, yeah. What I remember is in the 80s, we were clicking up, and forming groups and, going to different cities and breakdancing against other breakdancing crews. And they told us we couldn't breakdance in the mall. We couldn't breakdance on the pier. We couldn't breakdance in the school. And little by little, they drove us to stop dancing, and everybody joined the gang.
Wow.
And this is the same time that crack cocaine hit the inner cities. When I look back on it now, crack cocaine flooded. I grew up in a small part of the town that they call Ghost Town. You didn't go in there if you didn't have a reason to be there. and a lot of drugs were sold. I got into, selling drugs. And now you got to remember that my family never had money. We grew up on government assistance, and, making a quick $500 was like a really big deal. The gangs really started forming. But look at the fact that what the government did is the government actually started using military weapons. They had this thing called the Batarang, right? Which was a military tank that would come in and destroy a house if they suspected drugs were being sold there.
Wow, I didn't know that. They would really do that?
Yeah, and so now think about this.
Does this happen in a movie? I forget. I'm trying to think.
Menace to Society or one of those movies, yeah. So what we're seeing is, especially on the news, we're seeing military weapons being used against civilians. And if you see the rest of society, I'm talking about the rest of society, if the rest of society sees military weapons being used against Latinos or African Americans, they become the enemy. That's really what took place in the city.
Yeah, I'm from Florida, so I forget the whole stuff that has gone on in LA over the years.
Oh,
it was the police and
the police brutality, all that stuff. If you dressed a certain way, you were stopped. And then the whole cycle starts. You start going to jail and you're on probation.
What's going on with your dad at this point? Is he still in prison for most of it?
In and out of prison. We tried the geographical changes, moving to a different city, but the drugs always followed. And
Was he using too, or just?
My dad was a heroin addict.
Okay.
He was a heroin addict who started using when he was really young. And so the crimes that he was committing, he was a bank robber. Well, eventually he became a bank robber, and so did I, and so did my oldest brother.
Wow.
But back then, they were liquor stores, gas stations. At one time, we had a garage full of cash registers because they used to have the cashier outside of the gas stations in California way back when.
So they would just take the whole register?
They would just take the whole register, yeah.
So they would have a garage filled with them?
Our garage, at my house. And so, it was crazy. But I tell you what, my dad came in one day. It was my birthday. I hadn't seen him for about a week. He was on a robbing spree. When he walked into the house, it was my 7th birthday. And my mom said, you better go in the room and talk to your son because he's in there crying. Today's his birthday and he hasn't seen you. And my dad walked into the room and he said, happy birthday. And I'm so excited because this is my hero. This is the guy that, tucked me in and shielded me from the dark or the monsters. No matter what he did, he's my hero.
Yeah.
So he walks in. I'm so excited. He says, happy birthday. I said, thank you. He said, I have something to tell you. And I said, okay. He said, your daddy's a bad guy. And I said, yeah, I know.
Wow.
And he said, all I can do is be the best bad guy I can be. My perception is that my dad is out there committing robberies, but he's feeding us, right? So my dad has become...
that's his job.
Like a Robin Hood, like a modern day Robin Hood to me. And he's my hero. It doesn't matter what he does, I love this man. I just want to be in his presence and, watch football with him or play catch with, the baseball outside, whatever it was. He was my hero. And then he gave me my first birthday present. He said, I got a birthday present for you. I was so excited. I was like, you do? He said, yeah. He reached behind his back. He gave me a .25 caliber pistol as my first birthday gift.
7th grade? Or 7 years old?
7 years old.
Oh, my God.
I went outside and started shooting up in the air. My mom had a fit. I think probably within a month, the police raided the house. They took my father back to prison, and they confiscated my birthday present.
Wow.
So there's a shift that takes place. The police are now the bad guys. You got a young kid that went from playing cops and robbers and wanting to be the cops to now looking at them as they're the bad guys. And here's the thing about my upbringing, because I want to make it clear, I don't blame my parents or society. It's the way things were.
Yeah.
Right? As a young kid, I didn't adjust to things real well. There's other kids that probably endured a lot of the same stuff, that maybe went on to college and, and changed their lives. That didn't happen for me. I did graduate from high school later on, and I got married and, kind of left the gang. And we're talking about the 80s, early 90s, drive-by shootings and stabbings and gangbanging that you see in some of those old movies that we're talking about, Boys in the Hood. was real life stuff. In the community that I grew up in, I met a woman, a young girl. She was my high school sweetheart. She became the reason why I wanted something better. As I look back on it now, I think that I needed that in my life where she believed in me. The podcast is called Hell Has an Exit, right?
Yeah.
And she provided an exit for me without having to turn my back on the neighborhood. They actually, the guys that I grew up with, I still have contact with some of them today. They looked at me like, wow, you made it out. We're proud of you. It wasn't looked at in a negative way. The only problem is that, I grew up smoking a lot of marijuana. I didn't do any hardcore drugs, but when I moved out and got a little bit older, some of those responsibilities that I wasn't prepared for, sometimes they become too much. The 12-step fellowship that I'm a part of says our inability to accept personal responsibilities, right? We were actually creating our own problems. At some point I went out with some friends and I tried some cocaine and things just got really bad, really fast. I lost the house, the job, the car, the wife, ended up homeless on the streets. The wife didn't want to have anything to do with me. She's trying to protect my son, who was a baby at the time. Made the best decision, right? I mean, I was so angry at the time, but I know now she made the best decision she could, was to get her and my son away from me. And I struggled for years. I got introduced to a 12-step fellowship in 1992. And I struggled with it because I thought if I could just get clean, that I would get my life back and we could get back together. And when that didn't happen, I would go back to using to really numb the pain. You got to remember, this is a woman that helped me escape this whole lifestyle of insanity, right? And I think that from a young age, I was always looking for a way out, but never really having an outlet for that. And so for years, I struggled going in and out of treatment centers and in and out of jail. And 1996, 97, my father had already been arrested for bank robbery. My brother had been arrested for bank robbery.
Now, how did they start robbing banks?
Well, back in the 90s, it was pretty easy. You could just go in and, walk up to the counter and say, this is a robbery. Funny story, because my uncle started doing them first. My uncle, I think, had 30-something bank robberies or something, went on a bank robbery spree.
In California?
In California. All in Southern California, Long Beach, Wilmington, Carson, all the way down to, I think my uncle was like all the way down in Orange County. He ended up getting arrested. Was also a heroin addict and went to federal prison. Then my brother started robbing banks, and then my dad. And my brother went to prison and, he got 10 years. My dad went to prison for the bank robberies and actually got 20 because of his long criminal history. I ended up doing the same thing, and I robbed 10 banks in 30 days.
Wow, that's so crazy.
Yeah, I robbed 10 banks in 30 days, and then I got arrested.
I need to know more, like what was the process of robbing the bank? Was it just like you put a ski mask on, wave a gun, and just ask for the money? How much money are you getting at each robbery?
I don't remember each one, but I know that the last one I got, it wasn't a lot of money. It was like $8,000 or something like that. When I got arrested, I think I had $7,700 on me.
Wow.
The last robbery, I went in, and my thinking is this. I weighed 118 pounds. Right now, I weigh 170, weighed 118 pounds. My thinking is, once I get clean, they'll never know who that guy was, because I look like somebody totally different.
Yeah.
I got high. I went into the bank. Everybody on the ground, this is a robbery. All the bank tellers put the money on the counter.
Ski mask on?
No.
No mask?
No mask.
Oh, my. Are there cameras then?
Yeah. You got to think, though, at this point, it's desperation.
Yeah, you're just
right?
like, whatever.
At this point, it's willing to do whatever it takes for the next one. And if you would have seen me then and who I am today and what I do today, you'll start to understand that there's got to be more people like me out there. And society sometimes looks at us, right, while we're out there, and they think, what a waste of life, right? They look at us and they say, what's wrong with them, right? They should just get them all and, send them to the moon or lock them all up.
I've seen Facebook comments on overdoses where people are like, why do they bring them back to life? They should just let them die. Yeah, it's crazy.
So here's the thing. Today, I help other people. I use social media because I understand that it's an avenue to touch a lot of people. In the community that I grew up in, Wilmington, I still have friends today that will call me and say, I have a brother, a cousin, an uncle who needs help. Can you talk to him? Can you help us get him into a place? Right? I work for one of the biggest hospitals in Southern California with a grant from the California Bridge Program. What they're starting to do is make medication-assisted treatment a low barrier, easy access, and it starts in the emergency room. Part of my job is to change the culture of the healthcare system in the hospital that I work in and educate the nurses and the doctors so that they don't look at people and say they're displaying drug-seeking behaviors. What I tell them is I would much rather them display drug-seeking behaviors in the emergency room than on the streets.
Yeah.
And so if an addict...
Well, the thing is that when you're addicted to opiates, it's a full-time job. You don't turn it off and on.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's like, yeah, when you're on drugs, it's not like...
So think about this, though. First of all, if you're going through withdrawals and you want to get clean, you are already having the worst day of your life.
Period.
I mean, it is... I would not wish opiate withdrawals on anyone. I've experienced
It's like
them.
being lit on fire.
But if they got enough courage to walk into a hospital and say, please help me, that's what the hospital is there for. That's why most of these people's doctors, nurses, EMTs, that's why they got into the field. They wanted to help people. You start to hear people in the healthcare system say, those people. I remind them I'm one of those people. The stigma that's attached to a person using drugs will keep somebody from going in and saying, I need help.
And how society views like the success rate. Because they'll be like, oh, this person's been here 10 times, or this person's been here 5 times. It's like, I always use the gym analogy. Like the LA Fitness isn't like, nah, you already tried to get in shape 10 times. You know, we're done with you. You know, there are people that are trying every day. And yeah, maybe they're not in great shape, but at least they're doing something.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, it's better to watch someone try than to just give up on that.
Absolutely.
Because getting your ass to the gym is not easy, period.
Right. And usually when you go to the gym, why do you go to the gym? Not necessarily you, but a person. Why do they go to the gym?
They want to change their life. You know,
but they're usually motivated by seeing somebody else change their lives.
Yeah,
right?
because they know that it's possible.
They know that it's possible.
And maybe the person with abs isn't inspiring to them. Maybe the person who lost 10 pounds is.
Right.
You know, and maybe it's someone that pushed them. Maybe it's something they saw on TV. Maybe it's an Instagram post.
Right.
Or something.
Right.
But like there's some motivation that inspires them to say, maybe I could do that.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing with people
and we don't demonize people. We're not like, oh, hey, you lost 10 pounds. Now you gained it all again. You know, like we don't like make fun of people or call them weak or whatever, you know? So it's like, and I know that with addiction, it's comparable, but it's not in the same thing. Well, it's just such another level. If you think...
Here's the thing about addiction, though. So there's been a whole study, right? It's called the nature versus nurture argument. And the nature versus nurture argument is, were you born that way, or did you learn to be that way because of the society you grew up in, right? So there's a whole argument behind if a person is born an addict or if they're learned behaviors.
I think it's both. What do you think?
It's absolutely both. And so my thing is that I have a younger sister. You know, she smoked a little bit of weed and she drinks,
normal.
right?
Yeah.
But she's never really been into the whole like hardcore drugs. Is she an addict? Well, here's the thing. She can very well be an addict and have the addictive gene. It's just never been expressed because she's never used, right? And so because there's been studies to say, well, if you have the same mother and father, why is this one an addict and why is this one not? And they say, well, this one chose to. Not necessarily. They could both be born with the same addictive gene, and one of them displays them in a different way. Yeah. Right?
Just like diabetes or another gene or whatever, where it comes out in different areas. It happens with mental health.
Right.
There are people who have like episodes of depression when they're younger and it goes away when they're older and vice versa. For sure.
Yeah. So in the field that I work in now, I think that one of the things that I learned from the 12-step program was that by helping someone else, I can get outside of myself. I also started to realize that today I've become useful. In the book that I read, it says something about through abstinence and working the 12 steps, our lives have become useful. I understand that like I've been put in a position and, you know, I believe in God and the whole higher power thing, that God has put me in a position to do something very unique, something that I have a perception. My perception is from the inside, right? From the inside of an addict's soul. I remember what it's like to walk down the street and be looked at as that guy. The one that when you drive by, you just shake your head and you look and you say, man, what happened to him? Mm-hmm. I've been that guy that had to look down the sidewalk while I was walking. And so when I see people out there, I can still get in touch with those feelings of how it feels. And I remember being out there and just saying, I wish somebody would just help me, right? But not knowing how to ask for help. Mm-hmm. My father, when we were little, he told my mom and my sisters, if somebody comes over while you're cooking dinner, you never ask them if they want to eat. Mm-hmm. You serve them a plate. Because if you ask them, they're going to say no. You serve them a plate, and if they want it, they'll eat it. Mm-hmm. So in the field that I work in now, I don't ask people if they want help. I offer it to them and let them make the decision, right? But if you ask them, you just say, hey, here's this, you know, and let them make a choice. I've learned that, like, what do you want to do and how can I help you, right? And that's my approach.
Let's go back to the story. So you robbed 10 banks in 30 days. Yeah. And then you got caught.
So I got arrested.
How did they catch you?
They had been following me from the night before.
Oh, yeah?
And I was already in the local newspaper. I was on the local news. They had put out a reward for my arrest. They received some tips. They parked at the motel that I was staying at, and they watched me. The next day, my plan was to get out of town and leave because I got phone calls saying that I was on the news and in the newspaper, so my plan was to get out of town. And I don't know where I was going. I decided, that I would rob one more bank, get enough money, and then leave.
That last one.
I needed just one more. I got in the car. I drove around looking for a bank, and
so you wouldn't even have a plan? You would just drive around?
Oh, yeah. I just drive around, and they were following me the whole time. And the search for the right bank.
What would be the criteria?
I wouldn't go in if they had a security guard.
Okay.
Or if they had glass windows. Back in those days, they just had countertops. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have glass windows like they do now. So I would drive around, look inside the bank. If they had a security guard. Now, I don't have a gun. I'm not going in with a weapon. I'm just going in and yelling, this is a robbery.
You wouldn't even have a fake weapon?
No. Listen, here's the thing.
Would you pretend to have a gun?
Do you remember the story? My brother, my uncle, my father had all been arrested before me.
Because
and
they had guns.
I already knew if you pretend you have a gun, they'll charge you with a gun.
Yeah.
And that's 20 years off the top.
Wow.
And so if you go in unarmed, you don't get nearly as much time. If you, stick your finger in your shirt.
Same thing.
Same thing as a weapon. So I didn't go in with a weapon. And
you are the smart one in the family. I said you are the smart one in the family.
Yeah. So I ended up finding a bank and I parked. I shot some dope and smoked some crack and went into the bank, yelled out it was a robbery. I ran up, grabbed the money. I had a bag, put it in the bag, and I came running out. Now, the FBI is parked outside. In their mind, they were going to catch me when I came out of the bank. I guess I came out too fast and I made it to my car. And when I made it to the car, I took off, and a high-speed chase ended up ensuing. And, the helicopter, the sheriff's department, the FBI, undercover cars, the whole deal. And they ended up ramming me, 15, 20 minutes into the chase. And
that pit move is just so good.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, I don't even think it was a pit maneuver because they just rammed me. The FBI is a lot different than like a regular police department.
Police.
So they rammed me, and when they arrested me, the FBI came up to me and he said, "How you doing, Anthony?" I said, "I'm okay." He said, "Do you know why it took us so long to arrest you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, we have pictures of you from your previous arrests, and then we have this surveillance video from the banks, but you don't even look like the same person."
Wow.
And he said, "When's the last time you ate?" And I said, "I don't remember."
Wow. So the police officer asked you this?
Yeah, the FBI.
FBI?
Yeah, and then he told me that he had arrested my brother and my father.
Wow.
And so they already knew who I was.
So he had like some empathy.
Yeah. Oh, the thing is that the guy
felt bad for you.
The guy put me, I would have felt bad for me too. I weighed 118 pounds.
I mean, I've been arrested a couple times. Sometimes they don't really feel too bad for everybody.
The funny thing is that he put me in the car handcuffed in the front seat. And it was just me and him.
Wow.
He said, "I got to take you to Torrance because that's where the investigation started out of." I was in a few towns over. On the way down there, he asked me, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, you're going to go to prison for a long time.
Wow.
And I said, I know. He said, what do you want to eat? And I'm thinking last meal, like so I said, McDonald's. He took me through the drive-thru at McDonald's and bought me I don't know, a Big Mac or something.
That's pretty cool because, there are a lot of stories about fucked up cops and, the FBI, whatever, any type of law enforcement. But it is cool to see that there are law enforcement that do go above and beyond to show compassion.
You know what, this guy, he started asking me questions on the way down there. And he started asking me what happened with your life. Why are you in this position, right? He was, really curious about, what drives a person to do something like this. True story. I said, I'm an addict. I said, I'm a member of a 12-step fellowship, but I relapsed.
Wow.
I swear to God.
So you knew that there was a way out and you knew that 12-step meetings worked.
Yeah.
You were just on a relapse.
Yeah. And he said,
wow.
He was a Christian. And he said, do you believe in God? And I said, yeah. He said, I didn't arrest you. God saved your life. I went to jail, started going in front of the judge, and I signed a deal for 13 years. Mm-hmm. I was facing 200 years, 20 years for each bank robbery, and I had 10 counts. So I was facing 200 years. They came in and they said, we'll offer you a deal right now for 13. And I signed the deal.
Mm-hmm. Public defender?
Public defender.
Wow.
13 years. I'll get out in 10.
How old are you?
25.
Wow.
And so I ended up going to court to get sentenced. And the judge asked me if I had anything to say. And I spoke on my own behalf. I had members of the fellowship. I had members of the church and then family members all in the courtroom. So the courtroom was packed.
Do you believe in God at that time?
I've always believed that I had a purpose, that everything that was going on in my life was temporary, that one day life would be different. After I spoke, the judge, he ended up giving me half of the 13 years. He gave me 6.5, and I did 5 years. Mm-hmm. When I went to prison, federal prison, they send you anywhere. I ended up in Atlanta, and then from Oklahoma to Atlanta to just a bunch of different prisons. I finally ended up in South Carolina, and I started 12-step meetings in there. Rode to this office, out here in California, and requested some literature and some readings, and started meetings in there. And I stood clean while I was in there. The thing is that living on life's terms in prison is a little bit different than living on life's terms out here. Mm-hmm.
That was the first time you've been to prison?
Yeah. I had done little stints of jail and, juvenile hall and stuff like that. When I was younger, I was lucky. I never really did too much time. Mm-hmm. I got away with a lot of stuff. I always thought it was because I was smart. I think I was able to kind of navigate through, growing up like that. And I was really fortunate. I have an oldest brother who's actively using right now and is struggling. And he's been going to jail since he was 9 years old. Me and my sister's also in recovery and works at a treatment center, tried to help him. But I read somewhere where it says they can be beaten and counseled and prayed over, and an addict will not stop using until they want to. Mm-hmm. And that's where he's at right now, and it's hard. You've experienced a little bit of the same thing that I have, where we've seen addiction from both sides, a loved one, and then we've been the person using too.
Yeah, it's different when you've been there, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to help him, and my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, if you ever see your brother get in a fight and you don't jump in, I don't care if he's winning or losing. If you don't jump in, you're going to get your butt kicked when you get home. Today, I look at all those lessons that my dad taught me, right? And today it's about, I have a brother who does really good in life. Mm-hmm. And I have a brother that's struggling. And then the 12-step fellowship came in and taught me unconditional love. My brother's in a fight. And if I don't jump in, my dad's still watching. My dad passed away a couple years ago. He's still watching, right? And so I think about, with people in general, some people are in a fight, for their lives. And as a human race, we have a responsibility to jump in. Mm-hmm. It's easy to love your siblings that are doing good, but can you show that same amount of love to the ones that are not? That's what I've really tried to do with my oldest brother. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult. Sometimes my mental health struggles because of it. I start worrying more about him than I do about my recovery, and I have to shift and remember that if I don't take care of myself, I can't help anyone else. And I've been fortunate to be put in a position where I've been able to help a lot of people. I used to work in downtown Los Angeles on Skid Row, and I went out there with the attitude that here's a group of people that are unhoused, have nowhere to live, and they've lost trust in the system a long time ago. I come out there, I'm just another case manager who is showing up for a paycheck. That's their perception. He sits behind a desk, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know. And so I would share my story with them, and I would really try to do whatever it was that I could do for them to help them and let them know I didn't get into this field for the money, To see somebody really want to start making those changes on their own, it's been an amazing thing. I've helped people stop using, that lived out there, and that's a rough place to live. Downtown Skid Row, drugs are all over the place. It's a really hard place to live. And I've seen it happen out there where they start to make the changes and they want to get out. And some of them go back to using, but it's really difficult. Now at the hospital that I work in, trying to get people into treatment and just letting people know if you need help and you don't know how to get it, I can be the bridge in between. One of the things that I learned is in the 12-step fellowship that I'm a part of, they use this word, I'm sure you've heard it a lot, predecessor, right? I know some people that have been involved in the same 12-step fellowship for decades, carry the message, travel all over the place, help countless people. And they've paved the way for somebody like me by really dedicating their life to this way of life. What happens is we find...
Yeah, but like before treatment centers, people just got to clean up people's couches, other members' couches. I always say, like, I don't let people do that at my house. You know what I mean? So it's like...
That's tough.
Because but back then when, recovery was first starting and people were just getting clean, it was like...
It was the only way.
It was like people were kicking on couches. Yeah. If you didn't show up to the meeting, they were showing up to your house. It was a lot of real 12-step calls. Hey, I don't go to crack houses to pull people out. You know what I mean? But some people do.
There's a story.
And they did.
There's a story of a member from out here. One of the founding members of the 12-step fellowship that I'm a part of wanted to expand up to Northern California. Asked a member from down here to move up there and meet another guy because they had to have at least two to start a meeting. The guy left his family behind and moved out there.
Wow.
They were trying to start these meetings. And I believe it was in San Francisco. I might be wrong. And nobody was showing up. And they were putting flyers, and I think they had radio commercials. If you need help, if you're struggling, come, we could help you. And nobody would show up. And the guy left his family behind. And he finally called one of the founding members and he said, hey, so-and-so, this isn't working. And the guy said, just stay another week. Go into the garage where they set up the meeting and the coffee and just wait another week. And if nobody shows up, then you can come back. And they went out there one more week and some guy walked in and he said, is this where the meeting is at? He ended up joining the fellowship. So because there was two, the other guy could come back home. And I hear stories like that, right? About, them paving the way. So what's become important for me is I have two things that I believe in. Right. And it's really important for me. It's really shifted a lot of stuff for me. And I'll tell you what it is. It's honor and legacy. Every day that I stay clean and be a better person, I'm honoring those that came before me. And I'm leaving a legacy behind for those that are coming after me. And when I focus on honor and legacy, it removes me from the situation. Right. And when I'm able to focus on those two things, I'm no longer so important. Right. And not that I'm not important, but the self-centeredness isn't at such a height where it gets in the way of me being useful.
Yeah, it's like when you're on a mission, it's like you lose your ego because you're just about completing the job. It doesn't matter about if we did it this way or if I got credit for it or you got credit for it. It's like my job is to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And as long as we do X, Y, and Z, like everything else works out.
So think about this. When you talk about being on a mission, right? You talk about being on a mission, trying to get the job done. Well, for me, I'm a father of three boys. I have two boys that live in Arizona. And then I have an oldest son who lives here. We talked about him that, he just graduated from USC. I was talking to my youngest son last night. The mission right now is to show my kids by my actions that you could struggle in life, but you could overcome too. My mission in life is to show my boys a better way, that one day they'll look back and they'll say, my dad came from a very rough upbringing, but he changed the course of his life, and he helped a lot of people, and he became a good man, and he was loving and dedicated and compassionate and just had a lot of love in his heart, right? And if they see that, maybe they'll emulate some of those behaviors. I want to be able to one day, when I'm long gone, right, just know that, my grandkids didn't have to grow up the way that I did. When I was a kid, a lot of responsibilities were put on me as far as saving the family, being looked up to by members of the gang that I was a part of. And I look back now and I think about, you ever seen a baseball team struggle? The reason why they struggle is because their star player isn't willing to put in the work in practice. And people think, man, if he would just put in the practice, like that team would be so good. And that's where I'm at today, right? Because I've always been that person that could make things better for my family, for my job. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I want people to think that their life is better because they met me. In one of the books that we read, it's a daily meditation. I think it's September the 13th. It says, sometimes the world is a better place because a member of our fellowship was there. Because this is a worldwide thing, right? The world is absolutely a better place because there's people that are in recovery.
Of course.
That have brought a different perspective to this terrible disease. My dad died at 73 years old. Had been using since he was 15. And I always say that he paid the ultimate price for having this disease.
And you're telling me he was still shooting dope in his 70s, huh?
Yeah. And the thing is that my dad ended up with abscesses. He was taken to the hospital, and when he was taken to the hospital, they identified him as an addict. They refused to give him pain medication because, again, they said drug-seeking behaviors, he's just trying to get pain medication, and he was. But he was in pain, too. But they wouldn't give him pain medication. So he said, if you don't give me pain medication, I'm leaving. They put him in a wheelchair and rolled him down to, the emergency department and had my family come pick him up. My dad went back out and used for another, day. I think he used one more time. He became septic. His organs started shutting down. He went blind, and they had to rush him back to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital, they said, it's just a matter of time. There's nothing we can do to stop it. And this is the biggest, strongest, baddest person I've ever known. I grew up with killers and gangsters, and they were afraid of my dad. They wouldn't come to my house if my dad was home.
Wow.
And this disease took him. And that's how powerful it is. My dad, the last time I see my dad before, I was able to make amends to my dad. And I gave him my clean time medallion. And I told him I was going to continue living this way so that people didn't have to suffer like him. And I can't save everybody, right? The guy that guides me through the 12-step process always says, we can only keep what we have by giving it away, and that he wants to keep what he has. Right? And I think I want to keep what I have, but it's bigger than just me. It's about sharing the good news with other people that there's a way out, that you could find a way out. And after my dad passed away, I realized that I needed to start spending more time with my mom. That same book that I've been mentioning, it says, lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise. And when I read that, I was like, wow, all my lost dreams have come back. And the deeper I got into the recovery process, I started to understand that those lost dreams aren't always mine. They're my mom's. They're my kids. I'm talking about my son who begged me to stop using, my ex-wife who just wanted to see me do good in life, all the people in the neighborhood that I grew up in just looking and saying, man, what happened to him? He could have did so much. It's the lost dreams of our loved ones that's more important for me. I just been so fortunate I was dating somebody recently, right? While we were in the relationship, she said, tell me what it was like growing up. And I started telling her some of the stories and some of the things that I did and, how it was. And she said, I can't picture you like that. And I said, well, then the 12 steps are working. If you can't picture me like that, the process is working. But she said, how did you change from being so cold-hearted to being who you are now? And I said, I've hurt so many people. I just want to be a nice guy. I just want to help other people, because I know what the other side looks like.
How did you get clean? So when you got out of prison, so you did 6 years in prison, clean all throughout prison.
Yeah, clean throughout prison. It's more abstinent, I think. I did, do some step work and stuff like that, but there's only so much you can change while you're living in that type of environment. I got out and, I did good for about a year. I ended up going back to using, and I went to a treatment center. And when I went back to the treatment center, because they were ready to violate me and send me back to prison. My PO told me I had to go to this treatment center. I went to a treatment center, completed that treatment center, and I started working there. I met a young kid that was in treatment with me, and he was a little gang member, and I kind of just took the kid under my wing and, started telling him about getting clean and staying clean in this process and, this fellowship, and go here, the convention here, and get somebody to work through the 12 steps with you. And I believe in this program, and just really, I was on fire. Mm-hmm. He believed me, right? And he got clean and changed his whole life, ended up getting custody of his son, turned his whole life around. To this day, if I run into his mom always tells me, you gave me my son back. If it wasn't for you, my son wouldn't be here. I had introduced my sister to the same 12-step program. She got clean. Mm-hmm. Then she relapsed and went to prison. I had a guy that was sponsored. We had the same sponsor. He relapsed and he kept relapsing. And he called me one day and he said, I'm done. And I called so-and-so and so-and-so, and nobody answers the phone. I need help. Please help me. And I said, I'll pick you up. But if I pick you up, I'm taking you straight to a detox. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't care. Just please, come get me. I ended up picking him up March 2nd, 2004. He's still clean. Wow. I started working in treatment, working with teenagers, with kids. I had this one kid that said, he was living out in the streets. His mom was trying to help him. And I asked him when I first met him, I said, when you were a kid, what did you want to be? He said, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And I said, well, I can guarantee you, if you keep living the life you're living, you'll never be a Navy SEAL. I guarantee you. I said, but if you go to, this program, you might have a chance. He said he didn't want to go. And I said, listen, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Come for 2 weeks. And if after 2 weeks you don't like what we're doing, you don't have to come back. Mm-hmm. And that kid came for 2 weeks and stood for 2 years. Wow. And outpatient. And the last time I seen him, his parents were having a going away party for him because he had just graduated from high school and was going to the Navy. Oh, that's cool. Wanted to, try to become a Navy SEAL. Cool. I did a lot of things when I was clean, and then I got away from going to meetings and, the whole sponsorship and helping other people. And I ended up going on a 10-year relapse. Wow. And I think that...
How long were you clean before you relapsed?
4 years. Okay. 4 years. But I think it's important for me to discuss that I relapsed several times. Mm-hmm. I was that guy that sometimes goes to 12-step meetings and, takes a newcomer, key tag, and they say, oh man, that guy's new again. He's never going to get it. I was that guy. I struggled for a long time. This time, during that 10-year relapse, I ended up paralyzed. I had 10 abscesses. My organs were shutting down. My son ended up picking me up and taking me to the hospital. The doctor told me that I would never make it out of the hospital alive. My ex-wife, who's still a really good friend of mine, started calling friends and telling them to go say their goodbyes. Mm-hmm. I had people coming to see me, praying over me with their, spiritual beliefs. I had surgery and so many infections. Little by little, I started getting better. I had to go through physical therapy to relearn how to walk. My sister that I mentioned that I had introduced to this 12-step program, she had, back in 2003 or something like that, she had got 6 months clean, relapse, went to prison, got out, and moved to a different area and got involved in the same 12-step fellowship. When I ended up in the hospital, she came to see me and she said, if you want help, I got a bed for you. And I cried and I said, please help me. I just need to get back home. I need to get back to this fellowship that saved my life so many times. I just need to get back. And she said, you just get yourself better. I ended up going to that place. And when I got clean, I dove into the step work and sponsorship. The guy that I said that I took to detox in 2004 became my sponsor.
Wow.
He's one of my best friends today.
He's your sponsor today?
No, he's not my sponsor now, but he was when I first got clean. Cool. He's my best friend. Mm-hmm. He's my best friend. He, says I wouldn't have my life, married, beautiful home, kids, mm-hmm. Got a beautiful life. And, he just always says, if you wouldn't have picked me up that day, I don't know if I'd be clean today. Sometimes I think that, we see people relapse. For whatever reason, they relapse. I've done it where I judge them, right, when they come back. And I have to remember that, I've been in that situation. Somebody that gets clean and has been clean and has experienced this new way of life, and you go back out and relapse, that guilt. Because everything we do involves friends from, this fellowship. And, we talk to people on the phone. We hang out with these people. We go eat with these people. and you relapse and you feel like you don't have them, right? And it's not they're not there, but you pull away, right? Because of the guilt and the shame. You take that away from an addict, man, and it's painful. And I stood out behind the guilt and the shame and not having the courage to come back. I stood out for a long time and almost killed myself. So when I got back and I got into, with the sponsor and, doing step work and stuff like that, like I took it so serious because I knew that a relapse would kill me. I have so many scars on my body. I'm fortunate to be able to walk today. I got hundreds and hundreds of scars from abscesses, stomach, chest, legs, from shooting dope. I'm really fortunate to be alive today. And when you become that fortunate, you start to understand that, like, listen, I can't afford to, to waste time today thinking that I'll have more time to do the stuff tomorrow that I should be doing today. Like today, I need to make, everything that I can. And so, helping people or...
Yeah, and it's like living with urgency.
Absolutely.
And it's like, a lot of times, I feel like a lot of times people get clean and they feel like they got to make up for lost time and they put all that urgency into the wrong things.
Right.
So it's like, I've seen a lot of people like, when people get out of jail, oh, I got to go get the job in the car, and then they put all their urgency into there,
Right.
And it's like, in recovery, we learn to have urgency for like the right things,
Right.
and hold off on some other things.
I started working in a warehouse as a janitor, making not a lot of money. The urgency was, how do I make active changes in my ideas and my attitude? How do I become a better person? That was the urgency, right? A lot of times in 12-step fellowships, they ask you, oh, you must have missed something last time. What did you miss?
Yeah.
Right? And the urgency was to find out, what did I miss? Right? Where did I go wrong? I was really desperate to figure out, like, what do I have to do? And my sponsor gave me an answer, right? And the answer was real simple, right? He said, your only hope is to work the 12 steps. That's it. Before, in the past, I did some step work, but my step work was more like homework. It was an assignment that I had to do for my sponsor. It wasn't something that I was doing for me, right? And so I started to uncover some things about Anthony and, why I had, done some of the things that I did. I started to realize that it's always been about me. Right? What I want. I know that in one of the steps, in the 5th step, it says the exact nature, right? And I got to the point where, okay, well, what does nature mean, right? The exact nature. And when I looked up the word, it says, it comes from a Latin word, natura, which means the birth or to be born, right? So when I look at like these defects that we talk about, it wasn't just identifying the defect, but where did it come from? Where did it start? So some of the resentments that I had, started from wanting my father to be there and wanting to have a relationship with my dad. I hated other people that had a father like mine. I envied them, and I wanted that, and I never had it. An ex-girlfriend broke my heart, so I mistreated every woman. Nobody's ever going to get that close to me where they're going to hurt me the way that she hurt me. And I became, just really callous when it came to women. I always say that with the girlfriend, I remember my disease creeping in. Like the first time that I can identify it, where it said, you ain't good enough, tall enough, you ain't smart enough. And I started to doubt myself. Now, remember in the very beginning, I said that when I was a kid, I believed that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And now I'm doubting myself. I'm starting to compromise my own beliefs because my dad was a drug addict, and I said I would never use drugs.
Wow.
And now I'm compromising my beliefs, and a shift took place, right? A shift in my thinking took place. I didn't have a way to recognize that something had changed. It became like part of my life to, get in trouble. And like the 12-step process, I've been able to write that and come back to a place where I believe that God has given me a purpose, right? And that there's something that says helping others is perhaps the highest aspiration of the human heart, and something we have been entrusted with, right? So I looked up the word entrusted. It says to be given a specific responsibility. As long as I stay close to the God of my understanding and know that he has a purpose for me, I'm okay. That's the way I've really transformed like my life, and helping others and working on myself and trying to be a better person. I volunteer with, different community organizations to help the homeless, feed the homeless, like now with the job that I have, trying to get people off or trying to get them started with different resources for drug treatment and stuff like that. And then the biggest thing is showing my kids.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Showing my kids. There's a guy that said something a long time ago. He's from the East Coast. I'm sure you know him. A guy named Jimmy. He said, if you're going to church, don't tell your kids about church. Show them about church. Like take them, right? Well, when he said that, the way I looked at it is, don't tell your boys how to be a man. Show your boys how to be a man, right? That's what I've done. And it's been difficult because my two younger boys have moved away. They moved to Arizona with their mom. And understanding that because of some of the decisions that I made, they now have a stepdad, right? Mom is remarried. They got a good man in their life who has been a good role model for them. I have to accept that, but also still be there for them, right? My youngest son, he's not really into, like talking too much. But the middle one, we've always had a good relationship. And then my oldest son lives here he's staying with me. He came to stay for the weekend and he never left. But he's waiting to get into, trying to get into a master's program. But I like having him here. And we discussed it too. I didn't really talk too much about it, but, my son was also at one point using and, got clean and just graduated from USC and film school. And now, trying to go to NYU. My son has become my hero. I watched him change his life and go back to school. I went back to school and working towards my degree, and he just got his. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's been cool, man. So I just think that people that are out there that are still struggling, that looking for a way out. For some people, it's residential treatment. Some people, it's medication. Some people will go to 12-step fellowships. The way I look at it is I just want to help as many people as I can, right? And whatever they choose for their path, as long as it makes their life better. And when I think about my dad, and my dad like never having a desire to stop, would things have been different if he maybe would have been on medication or if he would have been offered something like that? Would he still be alive,
Or went to, treatment after prison or long-term care or something like that. Yeah.
He never went into anything like that. With my dad being part of the California prison system, the Department of Corrections, it was, go to prison, do 5-6 years, get $200 when you come home, and just throw you back into society. No education, no job training,
No therapy,
nothing like that. Yeah. He had 7 kids, right? How do you come back after being in prison for 6 years and come back and jump into a father role and know how to deal with all the issues that are going on in the house?
Yeah.
Almost an impossible situation for
that's what you're talking about in the beginning. It sets you up for failure.
Right.
Hey, well, I want to appreciate you coming on the show. It's a pleasure meeting you. It's so cool to get linked up with you.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, you had a really incredible story. Like I get a lot out of it because it's like, even being like from Florida, it's like hearing your guys' stories and like what it's like to like not just get clean, but to get clean in your area. You know what I mean? So like in Florida, I do a lot of like Florida natives, and it's cool to see like people from LA get clean in LA and like change their whole life. And like it's so dope that you went back to school.
That's the beautiful thing about recovery is that in every area it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's some of our background and our culture and the way we grew up is kind of made us who we are. So the way we do recovery is a little bit different. One of the things that I do know is that when I first got clean, after getting out of prison, I was introduced to a man who grew up just like I did, a big mustache, bald-headed. He passed away. But one of the things that he taught me is find somebody close to you that, that you can do this with. I've always had like somebody close to me, like a best friend that like, hey, we're going to do this, go to meetings and stuff like that, come from similar backgrounds and stuff like that. In different areas, like it's cool for us to like travel and go see how
people do
other groups are doing it and how they get along, or how they do their fellowship or whatever it is, conventions and stuff like that. So it's a beautiful thing, beautiful process.
Cool. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
I appreciate
Thank you so
coming
much.
out, man.
Hell does have an exit. Appreciate
Good luck with everything that you're doing, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-9222 1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.